Hello, my dungeon denizens, and welcome to the Dungeon Delver's Laboratory. And welcome to Dungeon Delver's Lab. So this first episode, I want to take a chance to tell you a little bit about myself, where I started in gaming, and maybe discuss a bit about what we're going to cover on this channel. So I started gaming about when I was 10 years old. At the time, we were playing a homebrew version of Dungeons & Dragons, I would say. It was made up by a friend's older brother. And as I grew older, I got into more complicated games such as Artel Saurian Cyberpunk, became a big Shadowrun player. Got very involved in the Vampire the Masquerade scene for a bit. But I always came back to Dungeons & Dragons. It's always been my first love in gaming. And the reason I like it so much is, as a game, it's a game of heroes, and it's a game of fantasy. And I've always liked the emphasis of, if you were to play general Dungeons & Dragons, it seems like a game of good versus evil, and those traditional tales you see in mythology. I played D&D very late into my 20s. Typically had a weekly game going well into college. When I was finished with school, I decided it was time to focus on my career for a bit. So this was around the time that 4th edition was coming out, and I took about a 10-year hiatus from gaming in general. I still played the occasional war game. Some of my favorites were part of the Advanced Squad Leader series. Battletech has always been one of my personal favorites. But fantasy role-playing and tabletop role-playing just seemed to be a little bit too time-consuming for me at the time. Tabletop role-playing seemed to be a little bit more of a time sink than I could afford through this period. And once I got more settled into my career, I noticed that I was suffering from burnout pretty frequently. In my field, I'm a computer programmer, and it's very common in my field to eventually reach a point where you feel like you're working, and you're getting pretty much your life becomes your job. So for me, getting back into role-playing games and getting back into the gaming hobby as a whole was a great way for me to find a release and a way to counteract a lot of that stress by not coming home at night and working on code and studying code, and instead working on writing stories and adventures and just putting myself someplace else for a couple hours a night. It went very far in saving my career. So when I came back, obviously now we're into 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, which for somebody who has been playing, who started back in 1st and 2nd ed, I can honestly say I enjoy it very much. I can say I enjoy it more than I enjoyed 3rd and 4th edition, what little 4th edition I did play. Not that I think 4th edition was a terrible edition. I don't want to start that war. But it just never hooked me like 1st and 2nd edition did, or what we call Beck Me Dungeons and Dragons, which you'll hear me talk a lot about on this channel. So as I work on this channel, what I want to impart onto you and share with you is my own experiences as a dungeon master for the last 20-some years, minus my 10-year hiatus, and what I've done to create a great experience for my players, and what I've done to facilitate the game. And I want to share new ideas. One of the paramounts of Dungeons & Dragons is homebrew rules and making the game your own. And I want to talk about new ideas, talk about things that I'm trying at my table, talk about ideas I hear from other people, talk about ideas that I hear from you, and how we can incorporate that in the game, and how we can always be pushing the hobby forward. I also want to talk about new ideas. One of the things that I often find myself falling into is what I call the Dungeon Master rut, where I seem to return to the pot for ideas sometimes and reuse the same idea again and again. And I think by working with this channel, I think it's going to give me an opportunity to interact with other Dungeon Masters and see what you're doing in your games to keep them unique and keep your players engaged. I also want to be sharing tips such as what software we're using, what pen and paper tricks do we have. I think it's important as technology becomes part of the game more and more that Dungeon Masters familiarize themselves with the tools out there and the limitations. To share a little anecdote in regards to that, I recently was running my weekly game, and we lost our internet connection. And for somebody who uses D&D Beyond and didn't have my books present, I had to wing it, and that was something I hadn't had to do in a long time, probably since my mid-20s. So yeah, I look forward to working on this channel. I look forward to reaching out, having you guys reach out to me and reaching out back out to you, and let's see where it takes us. Thank you. If you want to stay in touch with Dungeon Delvers Laboratory, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Dungeon Delvers Lab. Also check us out on Instagram at Dungeon Delvers Laboratory, and check out our website, dungeondelverslab.com. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. See you later.